Nothing compares to the promise I have in you. Promise I have. Nothing compares to the promise I have in you.
Please pray with me. Loving God, you've put some difficult things in the Psalms. The people who wrote them expressed all kinds of different feelings and things that they were going through, and that's right and good, because you've created a difficult world for us here sometimes, and we only make it more difficult. And it wasn't exactly easy to tease out what I thought you might be saying to us in tonight's psalm. So I pray, God, that I heard you right, and that the words I'm going to say will be a reflection of your love and mercy. Amen. So, Michael sent me a particular version of Psalm 73, which is the paraphrase or interpretation or whatever from the Doubter Psalms, which took me totally by surprise when I read it, because it's so very, very different from the two versions I had. I got one from the Message, which is, again, completely different from the one from the NRSV. So I don't know whether I'm coming or going sometimes with this psalm. But I think on the whole, they are all the same psalm, and they do all have the same message, even though it wasn't easy to find it. So I'm going to read the one from the Message, because it is so different from the one that we heard, and because I'm going to reference all three versions liberally whilst I'm speaking. No doubt about it, God is good. Good to good people and good to the good-hearted. But I nearly missed that. Missed seeing God's goodness because I was looking the other way. Looking up to the people at the top, envying the wicked who had it made, who have nothing to worry about and not a care in the whole wide world. Pretentious with arrogance, they wear the latest fashion in violence. Pampered and overfed, decked out in silk bows of silliness. They jeer, using words to kill. They bully their way with words. They're full of hot air, disturbing the peace. People actually listen to them, could you believe it? Like thirsty puppies, they lap up their words. What's going on here? Is God out to lunch? Nobody's tending the store. The wicked get by with everything. They have it made, piling up riches. I've been stupid, playing by the rules. What's it gotten me? A long run of bad luck, that's what. A slap in the face every time I walk out of the door. And if I'd have given in and talked like this, I would have betrayed your dear children. Still, when I tried to figure it out, all I got was a splitting headache. Until I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I saw the whole picture. The slippery road you've put them on, with a final crash in the ditch of delusions. In the blink of an eye, disaster. A blind curve in the dark, and nightmare. We wake up and rub our eyes. Nothing. There's nothing to them. And there never was. When I was beleaguered and bitter, totally consumed by envy, I was ignorant, a dumb ox in your very presence. I'm still in your presence. But now you've taken my hand, you've wisely and tenderly led me, and then you bless me. You're all I want in heaven. You're all I need on earth. When my skin sags and my bones become brittle, God is rock firm and faithful. Look, those who left you have fallen apart. The deserters that'll never be heard from again. But I'm in the very presence of God, and oh, how refreshing it is. I'm not going to read the whole of the NRSV version, but that's different again from those two. But the overall impression I got from reading both the Message and the NRSV version was the impression that the psalmist, he'd been brought up, as it were, with a prosperity gospel. You know, God will give good things to those who are good, and disaster overtakes those who've been bad. The wicked never prosper. That kind of thing. Which he has now rejected on account of the evidence. He says, frankly, that's just not what happens. Good people suffer. Bad people get all they want. What's going on? And then at first glance, it seems like he's just had a sudden relapse into his old religious prosperity gospel way of thinking, because he's been to temple and he's gone, oh, actually, I was wrong. It's all sorted out. But what he got in the sanctuary wasn't a sense of certainty and righteousness. It was a sense of proportion. You know, you look at what he says, and you look at the evidence. What do the wicked have? What does he say the wicked have? Money. I mean, probably not all rotten people are rich, and not all rich people are rotten. But there is a correlation between selfish behaviour and wealth. I know there's the saying, get rich or die trying. And yesterday I met someone with a wonderful t-shirt that says, get rich or try sharing. I like that. I want one of those. Because the association is that if you value possessions over people, you're more likely to acquire a lot of possessions, as opposed to, say, a lot of friends. Whereas if you're truly generous and you keep giving stuff away, obviously you're not going to be building up a huge excess. And if you actually trust God, you don't need to stockpile. It's like Jesus' parable about the guy who has this huge harvest and builds a great big barn to store it all in. Which was, maybe to us, who are used to people building big barns and banks to store things in, it doesn't come across as shocking as it did at the time, when what you did, if you had a big harvest, was invite all your neighbours round for a feast. It's what Granny Weatherwax in Terry Pratchett calls storing your wealth in other people. Sooner or later, they'll have a good harvest and they'll invite you round for supper. So this idea of shoving everything in a barn was totally against the way of thinking that Jesus grew up with, as thinking of the right way to do things, and what he was trying to encourage. Be generous. What good is it to you in a barn? What good is it to your neighbour in a barn? Then he says, the wicked have power. Reason being that you can get power by coercion, violence, bribery, manipulation, lies. You know, if you're not fussed how you get it, there's a lot of cheap ways to power. There's not so many difficult and honest ways to power. Not saying that there aren't honest people who have power. I mean, we all have power of one kind or another, and it's up to us how we use it. Nonetheless, these people he's looking at, they're getting their power by violence, he says. They've got comfort. They're not in pain. They're not hungry. They're not fearful. Because again, it's easier to have enough if you're not concerned about who you took it off. They've got popularity. And this one I struggle with because I do see it. I see it in the world. You've got these people. They abuse the poor and the vulnerable. They cheat them. They lie to them. They take away their money and give it to corporations and people who are already rich. And for some reason they love them. And they vote for them. And I don't know why. And, you know, the psalmist says, I set myself to do only good, and in return they call me names and jeer at me. Well, they do, don't they? A lot of people who spend their lifetime trying to be truly honest and work for other people mostly get a slap for it. I don't know why. I get a splitting headache trying to figure it out. they've also got no worry and concern. A lot of what troubles us wouldn't give us worry and concern if we didn't love. If the disappearance of the polar bear didn't trouble me. If the desperate cries of children detained in cages at borders didn't break my heart. If I were as cold as ice, I wouldn't hurt so much. And neither would I have anything else worth having. The psalmist is right, and the prosperity teachers are wrong. Evil does prosper, as far as we understand prosperity in this world. The good do suffer. Loving God faithfully won't make you rich, or popular, or comfortable, or healthy. It won't even take away your concerns, it just directs them towards the right stuff. And yet, the psalmist is right when he says that if I carried on talking like this, I would be foolish and a betrayer of God's children. It's a betrayal of God's children to say that then there is no point being good if you get nothing for it. As if we were only good in order to get good things. That's what Satan teases God about in the book of Job, when God's so proud of Job, of how faithful and good he is, and Satan says, yeah, but it's not for nothing, is it? He's only good, he only loves you because you've given him so much. What about when we don't? We're still supposed to be good. Sometimes people make sense of this by life after death thinking, which may be very comforting, and may also be true, but isn't necessarily useful in following the God who is love here and now. Pie in the sky when you die, as they say, doesn't encourage us to feed the hungry here and now. You know, they were right when they said that. If we only do what is right in order to avoid eternal punishment or earn eternal reward, we've missed the point. And we know this. Money and possessions, for instance, we say, you can't take it with you. Well, yeah, but what's that got to do with enjoying it here and now? You know? But there's another change of perspective that's about this life that helps us to see that in any case, those possessions weren't the treasures that we thought them. Whether it's here or hereafter, treasure in heaven means treasure of the Spirit, not treasure in the future. Treasure in heaven now. Treasure in here now. So, despite everything, and before I say this, I'm going to say, I do actually believe in God. Very fond of God. However, despite everything, I prefer to live like an atheist when it comes to this thing. I do not live in the fear of hell or the hope of heaven. I think God's got all that stuff sorted out. It's not really mine to worry about. A notion that would horrify the church that I attended as a student, where the whole purpose was to rescue souls from hell, you know, and store up thereby a reward for ourselves in heaven. Brush up ours a bit, ready, you know. And earthly life was just an opportunity to gather up as many as possible for the next one. And if I believed in a vengeful or punishing God, maybe that would have some, you know, meat for me. But if we have to frighten or bribe each other into love, to loving God, to loving our neighbour, what's that worth? What love is it that relies on the carrot and the stick? You know, I've actually trained a few donkeys in my time, you know, worked with a few donkeys, and the carrot and the stick works, more or less. But actually, you need neither the carrot nor the stick if the donkey loves you. If you get to know it, it'll do what you ask because it trusts you and it loves you and it enjoys your company, and it's enough for you to say, come, just, let's go this way, let's pull this, let's move that, let's not barge in there and eat everybody else's food. Thank you. Donkey's nightmare for doing that. You don't need carrots and sticks, and neither does God. So it's not in the fear of hell or the hope of heaven, but the reality of God's present kingdom. The here and now light and love of Jesus. Never mind about forever. God's the only one who knows about that, and God's got it in hand. As far as that goes, all I can do is trust. So if I were to go on envying the wicked and the prosperous, I would be a fool and betray God's children. I'd stop looking toward the needs of the vulnerable. I'd betray those children at the US border and all those in detention centres here as well. I'd betray the polar bears and the rainforests. I'd betray those who were in Grenfell Tower and all those still in buildings like it. I'd betray the everyday victims of casual racism and the disappeared gay men of Chechnya. I'd betray my little niece and nephew who look to us to model what's good and what's not. I'd betray the future that I will never see and the efforts of those who paved the way for me. Marsha P. Johnson, Televier, Rivera, Baldwin, Bonhoeffer, and so many more. Far too many to name. Time spent with God, pondering God's love, pondering what love means, puts it in perspective. Not so much that the wicked become nothing. God sweeps in with the armies of heaven, sweeps away them, and rewards us, whoever them and us may be. Because my idea of wicked isn't the same as my neighbour's, I can tell you that for sure. No, because they already are nothing. Nothing to envy. Nothing to emulate. Nothing to fear or to obey. The speeches are hot air, and we will see through them. What's been built by cruelty and destruction and hard-heartedness won't last. Walls, however high they manage to get, will tumble. What they try to destroy will rise again. Most of what we're urged to want and envy was never worth having in the first place. We won't have it in heaven. We won't need it on earth. Who else is there for me in heaven, the psalmist says, and with you I lack nothing. Nothing to envy, not because God will reverse the order of the haves and the have-nots, but because God already has. We have God. We have Jesus. We have each other. We have a job to do, building the kingdom, and we have love. What more could we possibly want?